Welcome to the Millionaire Next Door podcast with Robert Curtis, CFP accredited investment fiduciary from Signature Estate and Investment Advisors. In this podcast, we help successful wealth accumulators like you looking to transition to a work-optional lifestyle by helping you build strategies for growing and maintaining your wealth. Robert draws from years of experience and fiduciary responsibility and interviews guest experts to help you build reliable strategies to grow and maintain your wealth. Now, on to the show.
Well, great. Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Millionaire Next Door podcast. So pleased you've joined us. Today, we're going to delve a little further into estate planning essentials, really setting up the building blocks for a more impactful legacy. Regardless of your age or the extent of your wealth, estate planning should be an essential part of your overall financial planning. Not only does estate planning offer the means to preserve and ultimately distribute your assets according to your wishes, it helps you determine that your personal health care and wishes and directives are followed and helps minimize exposure to taxes and avoid probate on your estate. Yet, according to a recent survey, more than 2/3 of adult Americans, 67%, have yet to implement any sort of estate planning. And I want to give a couple of high-profile examples, but from Pablo Picasso, he died intestate, causing his estate settlement to take 6 years at a cost of $30 million, to the more recent death of Prince, who passed away without a will or an estate plan, leading to a contentious and costly 5-year legal battle for his $156 million estate. There's no shortage of cautionary tales about the importance of having a plan. Yet far too many people either procrastinate entirely or fail to update their estate plans to reflect changing circumstances. So with that intro in mind, I wanted to sort of frame that discussion. We're going to delve deeper into a particular estate planning issue coming up that we referenced quite extensively back in episode 46, recorded on March 20th of 2024 with our Director of Estate Tax and Financial Planning, April Rosenberry. Today, we're going to talk about, there's a scheduled 2025 sunset of the 2017 tax law and what that could mean. And I've brought on a guest who specializes in that area and really understands it. We're going to walk through that. My guest today is Roger Silk. Roger, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Do you want to talk a little, maybe introduce yourself, talk a little bit more about what you do, and then just launch right into what you wanted to cover?
Sure. I mean, I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned in your introduction of the importance of having an estate plan, especially for high net worth people. It astounds me how many people we run into who will not or have not put even a basic plan. One, when you were mentioning that, the disaster of Picasso, and the other one, case that I ran into a few weeks ago, can't tell you the name, but the parents, this was actually a father who was surviving, he just wouldn't do it. He wouldn't put his plan together, and it was like $100 and something million, died. And 4 kids, they're all fighting among each other. They fought for years and years. It was a feast for the lawyers, tied up in court. One day, the trustee who was actually holding the assets gets a certified letter from the court, opens it up. Turns out it's a court order to send all the assets to an overseas bank account, because somebody had gotten wind of this case and manufactured the person who was supposedly this guy's widow and won a court case and somehow got it through the overseas and the U.S. courts, and all the money went. And that's an actual story. I also have more stories than I would want to tell you about people who had not such a disastrous outcome, but ended up paying way more tax than they should. And so what we're going to talk about today, I hope, is some really basic things that people can do that they probably should be doing to not stick their kids with that fate, right? Because the person's dead and Well,
Yeah.
as far as we know, they're not aware of what happens if they
Yeah.
are.
No, that's exact. I've seen a couple though since I've been doing this 28 years now with second and third generation, but that's exactly what comes to mind. Who does this to their family if they care? Maybe they don't care, but if they leave such a mess. I mean, it's rare, but you're looking back, what in the world were they thinking? Why did they leave why did they create an estate and then not take care of it? There's a pretty good, we had a great discussion with a woman named Pat Miles Zimmerman on the podcast twice. That's fantastic. I always reference it. It's one of my favorite podcasts. So she was a broadcaster in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area for like 25, 30 years. I mean, everybody there knows her. She was in a second marriage. She was actually married to a wildly successful attorney, a former tennis player who played in the US Open against Arthur Ashe the year Arthur Ashe won. He passed suddenly of one of those things like colon cancer you get and you're gone real quick. He had done nothing. So she got to learn the hard way how to clean up. It didn't go to an overseas bank account, thank God, but she had to spend a ton of money on attorneys. And she's left when she should be sort of grieving the loss of the love of her life. She was actually kind of pissed off at the guy for not doing anything. And she spent a ton of money. She's written a book on it, but that's just it's kind of our overarching, we cover this a lot thematically, and we're here to help people. Roger could be part of our value-added support team. So keep going, Roger. But these are more the horror stories. We're not trying to freak you out. But these are the ones you really remember, and you're thinking, why on earth would someone do this to their family, their loved ones, unless they just didn't care? That's what I'm left with. So
Yeah.
anyway.
And I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. We see it. Everybody in the field sees really successful business people, and they will spend weeks working on what most people would think is a relatively minor aspect of the business or their investment portfolio, but when it comes to estate planning, somehow, I mean, and part of it's because obviously none of us knows when we're going to go.
Right.
I guess most of us think we have more time, and hopefully most of us do. But, you see people, they die, and there's no plan. And no plan, what's the old expression? Failing to plan is planning to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what makes the estate tax work is.
Yeah. Well, and there is a plan too. I mean, the government has a well-crafted plan, and those are laws, and it's going to default to that unless you do some planning. You still got to follow the laws. But you may want to take control of your legacy and direct it according to your wishes. And we're here as a team. We have a whole department of estate tax and financial planning and lots of professionals. So that's a discussion people should be having if they care and they want to affect that outcome. And they've spent their entire life accumulating an estate and they'd like it to direct it elsewhere as opposed to have it go, unnecessarily costs a lot of money for attorneys at the end of the day and go to the state. So there you go. Go for it. Yeah. Let's hear what you're thinking.
Yeah. So Robert,
as
you asked, so we've been in business for over 25 years now. I've been in this field, basically call it working with high net worth individuals and families since about 1990. So a few years.
Right.
And I guess it's 34, almost 35 years now. And so obviously I've seen a lot, done a lot. So the company is Sterling Foundation Management. We got our start, Robert, towards the end of the 90s when we were all younger. And that was the first .com boom. I'm sure you remember that. And my business partner, Jim Lintodd, and I we knew a lot of our contemporaries were participants in the .com boom, and they looked to us because we both had at that time already almost a decade of experience working with high net worth people. And we started working with people on their philanthropy, on their foundations. And with many of them, we found that we were able to be helpful working with their team of advisors. So people like you, they're CPAs, their attorneys, in putting together really effective plans that addressed not just one or two, but all the areas that are of concern in estate planning. So those areas, at a minimum for most people, is making sure that they take care of themselves, as you were mentioning, healthcare powers, their spouses, if they're married, which most of them are, the kids, the grandkids. Often you also have philanthropy. And then there's the 800-pound gorilla, which we haven't talked about except at the beginning, which is taxes, right? For most people, it's a mistake to let any one of those things drive the entire process. You want to find all of your goal areas, your areas of concern, and make sure that they are represented when you're making your plan. And so that's how we are involved in a lot of these, because we bring decades of experience, but also a particular set of expertise that we've developed over the years, largely working with high net worth people and with their philanthropic activity. For those of us who remember 2017, which seems like a long time ago now, there was a tax act. I think they always have these funny names for these tax bills. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act, I think, is the official name of it. The 2017 tax change. And that introduced a number of changes. And what we're going to talk about today is many of the changes that were introduced to the estate tax, the estate and gift tax law. And what's a little bit unusual is that those provisions, at least the ones that favor the taxpayer, are expiring, are set to expire, or as they call it, sunset. And it's funny, Robert, how they'll sunset tax cuts, but they'll never sunset tax increases or spending increases.
I'd like to say it's funny, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's sad. Yeah.
It is sad. Yeah.
That's how the system works. Wait, does this kick off right on January 1st, or does it?
That's my understanding. That's
Okay.
my understanding.
Okay.
And so some of the key things that will affect your listeners, the top individual tax income bracket. So right now it's 37. It's scheduled to rise by 2.6%.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll go to 39.6. The opportunity zones, which I know you're familiar with, are going away. And the big one that we were going to talk about today is the lifetime exemption per person for estate and gift is currently about 14 million, and it's projected to drop to just about 7 million. And the reason I say projected, the actual number will be determined on the basis of a formula, so we can't calculate exactly what it's going to be yet, but it's going to drop approximately in half. So right now, an individual has 13.6. That's probably going to rise in 2025 to around 14. So 13.6, and right now a couple has double that, which is 27.2. I can tell you some of what we're seeing and what you'd expect to see and what we actually see. What you'd expect to see is, this is assuming that people are informed and rational and want to preserve their wealth intact for their kids and their grandkids. So what I would expect to see, and what we do see a fair amount of, is people using the exemption because it looks like it's use it or lose it, right? Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. Maybe Congress will get together and decide to extend the 2017 law, but there's absolutely no guarantees of that. And given the way that Congress has been deadlocked on a lot of important things, most people that we talk to don't think that's a good way to bet, especially if you think about the logic. Let's say that you are a person, say you're sitting there as an individual with $20 million of taxable estate and $13.5 million of exemption. What are your choices? Your choices are you take advantage of that 13.6, and you can get at least 13.6 out of your estate, and you can put it in trust. You don't have to give it to your kids. The kids don't have to be able to get at it, or the grandkids. You can keep control over it. Or you can say, well, I'm going to wait and see. It seems to me the best that happens is that the estate tax exemption does not reduce, but then you're still where you are now. You haven't solved anything. But the worst that happens is you don't give away the money to your kid. When I say give it away, I mean, we're talking transactions that get it out of your estate, but they don't necessarily make your control go away. And the exemption drops by $7 million from 14 to 7. And then you die. And now you have an extra $7 million that's going to be taxed at 40%. That's $2.8 million of tax that, is going to go to the government and not to your kids or anywhere else that you might have wanted it to go. And so to me, it seems from a rational point of view, it's kind of a no-brainer to be doing your planning now and taking advantage of that exemption.
I just want to add real quick we have a lot of folks this applies to, business owners, people with concentrated stock. I mean, you mentioned .com, but now you think of a stock like Nvidia or Microsoft. Those are so far beyond the .com wealth. It's wild. So, but for folks who might have tuned out and thought $28 million for a couple, 14, I'm so below that. I've had these discussions. We'll let them pay taxes. We see a lot of folks, especially around Southern California, in Texas and whatnot. Let's say you have $3.5 million estate. Maybe you're set to inherit some money, somebody in their 50s or their 60s. They own some real estate. You could easily be over that number. So this could hit a lot of folks that may be thinking, hey, I'm under that number. I don't live in that world. We're obviously introduced to a lot of folks who do exceed that and have these wealth challenges. But I just wanted to interject that. So keep going.
No. That's a really good point, Robert. And I appreciate you mentioning that, because you're talking about people with Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, any of these, and it doesn't have to be a household name. There are lots of other companies that most of us haven't heard of that have made some people very wealthy. And it's actually a conundrum. And it's one of so before I said, I don't see any reason why people wouldn't give these assets away, but you just hit on a reason that a lot of people will raise as a reason not to give away assets now. And that is the step up in basis at death, right? Most of your listeners probably know that under the current rules, if you die owning a capital asset, your estate gets what they call a stepped up basis. And I know you know what this is, and I know your listeners probably know, but just in case anyone doesn't, the tax basis is the number that you look at when you sell to determine your gain. So for example, if you have a $10 million of stock and your tax basis is $3 million, when you sell, you have a capital gain, in this case, of $7 million, the 10 minus the 3. Everything else equal, if you die, your estate now has that 10 million, but there's this thing called stepped up basis. The estate's basis adjusts to the market value on the date of death. And so that stepped up basis has historically been a very attractive feature for people who own highly appreciated property. And as you mentioned, that highly appreciated property tends to be concentrated stock positions for people who did well in the stock market, especially in places like California. Real estate, if you've owned real estate in California, I think even since about 2010, you're probably double at least in most places, and business ownership interests, and pretty much any other capital asset. I mean, we see all kinds of stuff, as I'm sure you do. People own intellectual property, oil and gas, airplanes, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. I have a couple that are just stand out. I mean, just so where I've seen a step up in basis, I don't mean to cut you off here, but I mean, I have a gentleman I've worked with for years. It was him and his wife. He had Microsoft at 37 cents a share. He was a software guy. Yeah, I worked for any rate. His wife passed away, had a breast cancer. I want to say it was around 2014. So that $37 a share went up to 37 due to the step up in basis. Since her passing, now Microsoft, it's probably up in the high 300s, 400. Giant appreciation. We have another client recently. I was a husband and wife. The husband, they had a very concentrated position in Apple for them. It might not have been as high as a lot of folks, but for their net worth, it was a big percentage. He passed away like maybe a year and a half ago. They got the step up in basis. But even since then, the appreciation in the Apple and the unrealized capital gain is so large. And Apple hasn't even had the greatest run relative to some of these others like NVIDIA and Microsoft and et cetera, et cetera. So we see it. It's kind of a growing issue. Your estate just keeps growing. It's a wonderful problem to have. It's a great issue, but there's choices, and we can help plan through that and help you know what other folks are doing in that space, possibly avoid taxes or reduce down your estate. Some of these things are growing so fast, it's just a compounding issue. But back to you. I just wanted those are very real examples, and these are your typical sort of millionaire next door, not giant high net worth, but they're just right in the middle of it because of very successful investments that have done exceedingly well beyond anyone's imagined where they thought it would go. It's kind of a mind blower. Yeah.
And so what does this have to do with the estate tax? So one valid reason why people might not want, because if you give your Apple stock, your Microsoft, your NVIDIA, whatever it is, you give it out of your estate and then you die, you got it out of your estate, but your people who inherited it don't get a stepped up basis when you die. In some sense, and in California, it's sort of choose your poison, or it seems to be choose your poison. I'm going to tell you the antidote, but the choose your poison is if you sell and take capital gains in California and you're in the top bracket, you're looking at 37+% between the federal and the state income tax.
Well, can I ask for I'm sorry, this is kind of elemental, but let's say you gift off $20K of your Microsoft to an adult child or something like that. If you pass, they don't get the step up at that point, but they'd get it on their own estate, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, but
that could be a long ways off.
Well,
okay.
And I'm sure every parent listening to this is praying that that's a long way off.
Of course. Okay. At any rate, right. Sorry to keep going.
No, you're right. Yeah. But say take one of these people, and we talk to them almost every week. They have $10 million of, you name it, Apple, NVIDIA, lots of other companies that you maybe aren't such quite household names, and very low basis. And so just make the math easy to follow. Say I have $10 million and say it's zero basis. Just think about a $10 million gain. I have a $10 million gain and I sell it in California. I'm going to be responsible for the 20% federal capital gains tax, the 3.8 Obamacare tax. So now we're up to 23.8. Plus, last time I checked, California's top income tax rate is 13.3. So you add all those up and you get to 37.1. Well, that's not very far off the federal estate tax rate of 40. So it appears that you're damned if you do and damned if you don't from a tax point of view. But what if you could get the asset out of your estate using up your estate tax exemption, which is going to go away probably, get it out of your estate so you avoid the estate tax, and be able to sell it so that you can redeploy the assets, right? Because most people, 10 million or whatever the number is in a single stock is way too much concentrated risk. And so what if you could do that? Well, it turns out that you can. You solve both problems. And I think that's one of the things, Robert, that you wanted to talk about today is how do you do that?
Yeah.
There are several different ways to do it. One of the ways that we're looking at and doing for people is there is a kind of a trust. It's tax exempt trust, and it avoids capital gains. So here's how it works. Person, let's say they're your client, they set up this tax exempt trust. We'll call it a stock diversification trust because we're talking about stock. The trust is tax exempt because it qualifies as tax exempt trust. And you can look it up. It's on section 664 of the Internal Revenue Code. The client contributes their appreciated stock, their 10 million of Apple or whatever, to the trust. And now the trust can sell it without having it, and there won't be any capital gain because the trust is tax exempt. Your client can retain the right to receive income for the client's life, client's spouse's life. And typically what we would then do is after those two, we call it Gen 1. After Gen 1 is no longer alive, if there are kids, those kids can have the right to receive income. And then that's Gen 2, the kids. And then depending on people's ages, it's all actuarially determined. Gen 3 can get income. You're taking an asset that you can't really get your hands on the full 10 million because one way or another, you have to pay tax. But if you put it into trust, now the trust can sell it, you diversify. So you solve that risk problem, right? Because Apple's probably going to continue to do fine, but there are no guarantees, right? And any of us who looks at the history of once great companies that are now just memories, it's very sobering. General Electric, which was like, for 100 years was like the greatest company in America, almost went away. And it's a shadow of its former self.
J.C. Penney, all the autos.
JCPenney,
You could go Martha
Sears.
Stewart Living. You can go on and on and on. Yeah, we have in the past. And it's shocking. Yeah. Even AT&T, my goodness, what a disaster. Worth 20.
Yeah. So people can remove that risk, diversify that risk. You don't remove it, but you diversify it. And when they set up one of these trusts, they fund it. The trust has two classes of interest. One is called the lead interest. That's the income, the right to the income for the next, 50 or 60 years or however long it is. And the other one is the remainder interest. What stays in your estate is the lead interest. And for tax purposes, that lead interest is worth about 90% of the value of the assets you put in. So what does that mean? It means several things. When you put the asset in, you'll get an income tax deduction for about 10%. So let's take our $10 million example. Put $10 million in, you get an income tax deduction of $1 million. That doesn't drive anything, but it's certainly nice to have, right? Most people who have that kind of money could use an income tax deduction. But now let's say you were going to make a gift to your kids, that 10 million that you put in for tax purposes is worth 9 million. So you could then turn around and let's say you have a generation skipping trust, and that would be for your kids and grandkids and everybody. You could, if you wanted to, gift that lead interest. Now it's out of your estate. You have to file a gift tax return. You have to get it valued, but it's out of your estate. Even though the trust has assets that are worth 10 million, you used up 9 million of your exemption, but more importantly, you got it out. And so what we're doing is we're seeing a lot of is, especially if there are two people and they both have their exemption, we're seeing people use up one entire exemption. And so you could get $15 million out of an estate with using up one exemption, using one of these trusts, and there won't ever be estate tax on that, and there won't be capital gains tax. And so between the two of those, you're saving could be over 50% just by smart planning. You haven't really limited yourself in any meaningful way. And just take a second and say, why use up one person's entire exemption instead of half of each person's? And I'm sure that your estate planning team would give the same advice, assuming that you're not worried about divorce and those kind of things. And if you're worried about all those kind of things, then you're probably not doing this kind of planning. And the reason is the way that we understand the rules as they're supposed to be. If let's say your exemption is 14 million and you gave away 7 million, you and I and most people would probably think, okay, well, I have 7 million left. But as we understand the rule change, it won't work that way. They're going to take it off the bottom, not the top. So that they're going to say that if you gave away 7, well, you used up your lifetime exemption, you now is 0. So if you're going to give away 14 and you have two $14 million exemptions, husband has 14 million and wife has 14, probably makes more sense to use up one spouse's entire exemption so that the other spouse would still have whatever's left after the law change. Does that make sense, Robert?
It does. And I was going to ask, though, not to cut you off, but maybe give do you have a favorite example or one that just really illustrates that, and of someone you worked with in a state that, I don't know if you had a
so
quick case study.
Yeah, we're looking at one right now where they happen to have $15 million of Apple. And it's mind-boggling to me how many people there are running around with $15 million of Apple. Because, if they bought it a while ago, it wasn't a huge investment when they made it.
Right.
And of course, it's been very popular for a long time. And so this is $8 million of other assets. And so this couple, they don't need, Apple doesn't pay very much dividend anyway.
Right.
And they've got other assets and they've got other income. They've got kids and they've got grandkids. So they happen to have this 50 million with very low basis, and exactly the conundrum that we were just talking about. Well, I want to hold it because Apple's a great company and one of us might die. They're in their 70s and we'll get a step up. But no one's really excited to hold that much. That's like 2/3 of your net worth in one company. Makes people worry, especially, Apple goes from 200 to 170 and it's like, oh my God, we just lost 10% of our net worth. And so what we're doing there is, and we're working with their counsel, we call it kind of his and hers slats. You know about slats, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So a slat, for people who haven't heard of that, it's a spousal lifetime access trust. And people sometimes use them when they want to take advantage of their exemption to reduce their taxable estate. But if they need it, and the need can be in quotes, still have access to the income, right? And there's a lot of detail. You got to consult with your lawyer because, as you do with any of this planning, I don't know, Robert, if we gave a disclaimer, but we don't give legal advice. We don't give tax advice.
Yeah, we don't as well. We have a Department of Estate Planning that we could work through. We have two attorneys, very, very seasoned estate planning attorneys. We don't draft any of the documents, but I just want to let folks know this may be getting a little deep in the weeds for folks, and we're not going to solve it all here today. But if you're approaching these issues, we can have conversations and often provide a lot of terrific guidance without a big bill that comes to you. And then maybe direct you out to attorneys that do things. But yeah, we don't give legal advice either, for sure. We tell everyone, check with your counsel, your CPA, your trainer, your personal physician, your shrink, your soothsayer. Yeah, any rate.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Robert. And because you guys have a lot of experience and we have a lot of experience, we can often help save the people a lot of legal time by basically sharing with their lawyers and their accountants and their other professionals the best practices that we've seen and participated in with similar clients. So to come back to these folks who have the 15 million of Apple, they don't feel comfortable saying, well, I'm never going to have access to that money, even though you and I both know they're going to be totally fine. $8 million is enough to get by on. So they're going to use one slat. They're going to use they're going to use all these things that we talked about. They're going to use a stock diversification trust. So they put the 15 into the stock diversification trust. Now it's worth 13.5. So that's just under the lifetime exemption for one spouse. And they're going to use that whole thing up, put it in trust for their kids, but with the other spouse having access if he needs it, which nobody expects. So it solves all these issues. When the Apple is in the trust, it can be sold. And now you diversify. So the risk, you can calculate the risk in terms of portfolio variance and all that, but it's a huge reduction in risk. There's no income tax, there's no capital gains tax, and we've gotten the entire amount out of the estate. So there's no estate tax, and there won't be. Most likely what's going to happen is They're never going to need to touch that. It's going to grow. They're probably not going to take the income. And the way we do it, it can grow tax deferred. They don't take the income, and it'll be there for their kids and their grandkids. And if something goes sideways and they need it, the husband can access it, income, if he needs it. So they've really got things covered. And they're going to keep the $8 million. They're not going to do any other playing with that now. They're going to say, we're going to take our chances that we pay a little bit of tax, and maybe they'll probably, actuarially they'll live for quite a while. I think these folks are in their mid 70s. So actuarially they're going to live for another 15 or so years. So they'll have additional opportunities to plan as things happen, right? I'm not trying to solve everything now for everybody, but where there is a appreciated asset and it's large, and there's this use it or lose it estate tax exemption, we're doing this. So that's an example with stock. We're doing the same thing where there's real estate, because real estate is another one of these things. People want to hold it to get a stepped up basis, but then it's all in the taxable estate. We call it a real estate shelter trust. You can put the real estate in, trust is tax exempt. So when that gets sold, when the real estate gets sold, there's no income tax. Similar kinds of planning opportunities that you can do. Same thing with businesses. Every business, you have to look at it as every business is an individual case, but conceptually, you can take a business or a part of a business and put it into one of these trusts and get it out of your state. We're working on one right now where it's the business today is worth about 25 million. The business owner expects that it'll be worth 50 million in 3 years. And you know how a lot of businesses are like that, right? If they're closely held before there's a deal, the valuation is relatively low because there's so much uncertainty. So what this particular guy is doing is taking half of that business, putting it into one of these trusts with the expectation that when it sells in 3 years, it's going to double in value. And he's giving it out now to a trust for his kid. His kid is only in his 20s, so he doesn't want to dump a bunch of money on the kid. And the trust is written in such a way that the kid won't be ruined. But again, it's a situation of taking advantage of one of the spouse's lifetime exemptions while it's there. And if things work out the way that they're expected to, they'll have 25 million outside of the estate without having paid any tax and still have one of their exemptions left.
This is great. I don't expect everyone to get this right off the get-go. I think the valuable lesson is there's a lot of planning. We'll work with your counsel. As I've mentioned many times, I have a value-added support team. Roger can be part of that. We can find solutions. We can have conversations, vet them out with all your professionals, your CPA, your attorney. A lot of times your CPA and attorneys, they may not even have gone there. They're just used to standard estate planning. They may not have the experience to go through all these things, but we can have these conversations. We can facilitate it. Apple is such an example. I've seen so much. I was looking at where somebody paid $3,300. They bought Apple and now it's worth $150. So think about higher multiples. Again, across my entire career with Apple, the only thing I've ever heard anyone say is, I only wish I'd gotten more. That's all I ever hear. I don't even care if it's down a little bit. But then those issues fester and they grow and they become a really large percentage of one's net worth. And some of these folks that may sound like a lot of money. They may not be living all that fancifully. It might be sort of tucked away where it's just this large asset versus delivering value to their life. But Roger, I thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to wrap up, because we're kind of coming up on time where we need to land the plane, but anything else you want to impart other than just the partnership will help you think through it? We'd be happy to have conversations. What else would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so we're happy to talk through, what we like to do, Robert, is whenever somebody brings us into a situation, we want to understand, obviously, the facts, get as complete an understanding of the facts as we can, then understand the client's goals. Because really, all of this should be driven by what is the client trying to achieve? What's important to the client? What are they worried about? What are they excited about? I'm laughing because reminds me of one 88-year-old. When we said that, he said, "I'm 88. I'm not excited about anything."
Okay. Okay.
Nobody's excited to pay taxes, right? Everybody would rather have their assets go to their family or some cause that they care about. And the entire time, and I have no idea how many thousands of people I've talked to, one person has ever claimed that he wanted to pay more taxes. And I said, well, you can go ahead and do that. There's a program to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a program, Robert, that the United States government has run for decades where you can give more than you're supposed to. You know how much they've raised? The last time I looked, they've raised $1 million in the entire history. Like, you're talking a nation of 330 million people.
That's great. That's great. I've thrown that out. You can write the check anytime but I've never actually heard that number. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
It's all about, what are you trying to achieve? And are there tools or insights or techniques, ways that we can help you do that? And obviously, it goes without saying, strictly within the law.
100%. We don't like to go, we like stuff right down the middle of the fairway. A lot of these folks, we want to keep, if they're well off, we want to keep them well off, not jeopardize things.
Yeah.
So, and, we understand there's a lot of value to what the country provides. And, if I call 911, I want police and fire to come, I want some national defense. But at any rate, we can help you think through all these things. We get introduced to a number of cases, the NVIDIA, the Microsoft, John Deere, Monster Beverage, some of these just wildly successful things, even people's, like you mentioned, private businesses or real estate, people who owned real estate on the coast, in the 1960s. It's shocking what it's worth as a teardown, right? It's mind blowing. So,
yeah. Robert, one other point that I think might be interesting to some people, I actually heard Buffett say this, and I think he probably is a pretty well-respected authority on these kind of things. He said concentration, by which he means, having all your eggs in one basket, 15 of your $20 million in one stock. He said concentration can make you rich.
Right.
But diversification can keep you rich. He sold $20 billion of Apple the other day. Even the famous never sell. He sold a lot of Apple. And so I think it's really important, because we see this, you probably see it. People get emotionally attached to the stock that has made them rich, and the stock doesn't care about you.
No.
And that's, people understand the logic, but when you have somebody like Buffett out there saying it and acting on it, I think that maybe that can be helpful for people to get over the emotional attachment to some of these stocks.
Right. And you may ultimately decide to pay some taxes, but I think it's a good idea. Most people would want to be advised of other options beforehand. And then if they consciously choose to make that, I've had people just sell stuff and in concert with their CPA, and that's a valid decision if they choose to go there. But at least they were advised on choices and other alternative strategies. And this is a complicated area, dealing with these concentrated positions that are highly appreciated. So that's why we're providing resources. Roger, I want to thank you for coming, being on the podcast. We can go into this further at possibly on another. We'll provide links in the show notes to you. I'm happy to introduce anyone to Roger and have a conversation together.
Is it okay if I give a little contact information in case somebody's listening and not reading it? So if you want it, the best way to get a hold of us is by the telephone, the old-fashioned telephone, 703-437-9720. 703-437-9720. The company is Sterling Foundation Management. We're based in Reston, Virginia. You can look us up on the internet. The website is sterlingfoundations.com. That's STERLINGFOUNDATIONS, sterlingfoundations.com.
Great. So now you've got Roger's contact info. Thank you so much for being here. If you, Roger, and for those who are listening, and if you like this episode, please share it. Please feel free to share this as an evergreen resource. If you know someone that this might apply to, we'd love to help out so if it applies and see if there's a good fit. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we hope to see you on future episodes.
Thank you for listening to the Millionaire Next Door podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Signature Estate and Investment Advisors. Signature Estate and Investment Advisors LLC, SEIA, is an SEC registered investment advisor. However, such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and no inference to the contrary should be made. Securities offered through Signature Estate Securities LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through SEIA LLC, 2121 Avenue of the Stars, Suite 1600, Los Angeles, California, 90067. Telephone number 310-712-2323.